Tonight, an in-depth look at the brutality at Rikers Island Correctional Facility as featured recently in the New York Times. The inmate population has dropped overall, but cases of abuse, especially at the hands of corrections officers and prison staff, is up. Well, tonight, Norman Seabrook, president of the New York City Correction Officers Benevolent Association, he joins us live to speak out about the case. And today, it marks day 5 of a looming strike hanging over the heads of hundreds of thousands of rail riders. Business owners throughout the region are also bracing for the worst. We'll have a look at how a strike could impact their bottom line. Plus, ahead of tonight's All-Star game, Major League Baseball comes out swinging, announcing new rules to protect openly gay ball players. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I am Richard French and thank you so much for joining us. And tonight we will begin on Rikers Island, where 11,000 inmates, they're imprisoned, and mentally ill inmates, they make up now nearly 40% of a population. That's a spike that we've seen in recent years. A secret internal study by the New York State's Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, obtained by the Times, shows mentally ill inmates are often brutally attacked at the hands of correction officers and other prison staff who are ill-equipped to work with those who suffer from mental disorders. The Times says, quote, "The report helps lay bare the culture of brutality on the island and makes clear that it is inmates with mental illnesses who absorb the overwhelming brunt of the violence." They went on to say that over an 11-month period last year, 129 inmates suffered serious injuries. 77% of those seriously injured, those inmates had received a mental illness diagnosis. Their injuries were, quote, beyond the capacity of doctors at the jail's clinics to treat in altercations with corrections department staff members. Well, tonight, political journalist and author Dominic he will join us now live, and he's joined by Norman Seabrook, who's head of the New York City Correction Officers Benevolent Association. Mr. Seabrook, he was featured in the article. Dominic?
Well, good evening to you, Richard. I'm so glad that you started that way, noting these statistics. Because the bottom line here, Richard, the allegations are completely outrageous. And Mr. Seabrook, this is why we want to give you the opportunity to respond to some of this. I'd like to start where Richard started with. 129 inmates suffered serious injuries in the last 11 months. Now, serious injury is defined as beyond the capacity of doctors at the jail's clinic. So in other words, you've got to go to the hospital. So these are very serious injuries. We can agree that tensions are high on Rikers. Mentally ill patients, if you will, they're in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day. What in the world is going on with correction officers at Rikers?
Well, Dominic, thank you for allowing me to respond to the allegations that are completely disingenuous on behalf of the Department of Health. First of all, if you understand that the clinical staff at Rikers Island, they can't even give you sutures. So a serious injury to them may be giving an inmate 3 stitches, when in fact that they're not capable and or qualified to give out stitches. So that inmate goes to the hospital. So when someone says, well, it's a serious incident, all inmates go to the hospital from Rikers Island when they have stitches that have to be sewn up for some reason. So the New York Times talks about a secret investigation that the Department of Health did. There are no secrets in the New York City Department of Correction. The Department of Mental Health could not travel throughout the facility of any jail in the Department of Correction without the escorting of a correction officer or several correction officers. So I think that they're being a little bit disingenuous. That's part one. Part two, the inmates that they're talking about, 129 inmates that allegedly received these types of injuries from New York City correction officers out of 11,000. I certainly am no accountant, but I certainly don't think that that even rises to the level of a half a percent.
All right.
And let me go one step further. Let me say that these inmates are violent individuals, and if these inmates that are 40% incarcerated in the city's jail system have mental health issues, then they shouldn't be in the jail system. They should be placed in a hospital where they could receive the treatment that they so rightfully deserve.
Okay, let's talk about, and I'm going to let the actual inmate from the Times story explain his situation in just 1 second. But let's start with Dixon. and also Andre Lane. Now, apparently, they became upset at the officers for not giving Mr. Lane his dinner, and they either splashed the officers with water or urine.
Okay.
They were handcuffed and taken to a part of the hospital, of the clinic where they're treated. And one of them said, that is Mr. Dixon, you're looking at it on the screen there, he was taken into an examination room where there are no cameras. And he was begging for his life. And he said, "Don't leave me." He kept yelling to the medics and social workers. He said, "They are going to kill me." Now, according to Mr. Dixon, he was beat and handcuffed by about 6 officers. So now, wait, I'm gonna give you a chance to respond. So now I want you to take a look at what Mr. Lane actually had to say about his beating.
One officer took a knuckle brace and put it on his hand and it just started hitting me. Boom, boom. And that's when I started getting dizzy. They got me outside the B gate. When they got me outside the B gate, they brought the stretcher. I was fighting to get on the stretcher. I didn't want to get on the stretcher. When I was fighting, one of the officers just jabbed me both ways. Bing, bing. The lieutenant came and was like, "Yo, stop resisting." How can I be resisting when I'm cuffed to this gurney? How can I be resisting? My teeth is all bloody, my mouth is all bloody. I got blood all down my throat and blood from my head to my feet. I was bloodied up. They said if I would have lost a little bit more blood, I would die. I probably would have went in cardiac arrest.
Now, Mr. Seabrook, a person in the health department, this is what they had to say as it relates to this alleged beating that occurred. This one was much worse and longer, based on the email. Staff members were visibly upset, and some said they were sick to their stomachs.
Well, look, Dominic, let me say to you, first of all, as watching the inmate make his allegation, he's sitting there smiling. Obviously, this person has some psychological problems. That's number one. Number two, we don't have.
What does that have to do with your officer's behavior? Okay.
No, hold on. Let me clear this up for you so that you understand this. We don't have lieutenants in the New York City Department of Corrections. We have captains. Now, this person has been in the system long enough to know the difference between a lieutenant and a captain. A lot of what he's saying is total fabrication, okay? And as far as
wait, the members of the health department are lying?
Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something about members of the health department.
At the prison, at Rikers.
At Rikers Island. A lot of the members at the health department at Rikers Island are second-class health clinicians. They're not even qualified to be working in certain areas in the municipal hospitals throughout the city of New York. Rikers Island is a dumping ground.
But they know what they witnessed?
Listen, a lot of people could say what they think they witnessed, but would we talk about the force that this inmate used against correction officers? We don't talk about that. We don't talk about how correction officers get their fingers bitten off, okay? We don't talk about how correction officers get their head busted open by the same inmates that you're sitting here telling me about over here. These are real, actual pictures of correction officers. This is a correction officer that used to have a thumb. He doesn't have a thumb anymore. This is an inmate here, okay, that was slashed by an inmate, okay? Now, what do you do with inmates like this? Well, I'm supposed to say, okay, you know, we don't want you to be in problems, but you know what? These inmates are aggressive. They're assaultive, they're disrespectful, they have no respect for the law. Correction officers do not use excessive force. There are some that may go over and beyond, and we deal with those because I don't want them in my organization as well. But at the same time, I'm not going to allow people to denigrate, if I'm saying the word correctly, correction officers when they do a very tough job. These are the same individuals that the public doesn't want on the street. Now, does that inmate scream and yell, "Oh, please don't leave me here"? Yeah, after he beat a correction officer half to death, yeah, now all of a sudden, we can't use force to make sure that this doesn't happen to anybody else. Now, I'm not making excuses for the Department of Correction.
But it does sound like you're saying an eye for an eye.
No, I'm not saying an eye for an eye. What I'm simply saying is we will use whatever force is necessary to terminate whatever incident is that we have to terminate. Now, this guy is talking about, oh, they handcuffed me, and he wrapped something around his knuckles. Stop that. We're not even allowed to have black gloves in the city's jail system, okay, because of people that have made allegations.
Okay, all right, well, let's go back. I just want to understand something.
Go ahead.
Are there cameras in the health clinic area of Rikers?
Yes, there are.
In every examining room?
you can't go into somebody's private area.
Right.
I understand that.
So if
now,
a beating is to happen,
if that be the case, then why weren't these correction officers arrested? They weren't arrested.
Well, we do know some correction officers have fabricated reports.
Hold on a second, Dominic. Let's talk about it now. The Department of Investigation alleges that they were going to lock up 12 correction officers that did something wrong. That's over in one instance. That was a course of 18 months, 24 months. But do they talk about the correction officers that beat the same case that they're trying to bring against us? No.
But one has been arrested.
Yeah, one has been arrested. Okay, one has been arrested out of thousands of correction officers that allegedly conduct these beatings of inmates. Inmates are not to be beaten. Inmates are not to be treated like dirt. People are not to be treated like dirt. But I will not tolerate an inmate assaulting another inmate, a correction officer, or a medical technician, where we had a female medical technician have her jaw broken by one of these inmates. Now, what needs to happen is the Department of Investigation needs to investigate whether or not Dr. Bassett and her mental health clinical people are doing what it is that they're supposed to do, because if they were doing what they were supposed to do, then that inmate should be in Bellevue Hospital or in Creedmoor or in an institution that gives him the proper care that he needs. Why don't we talk about the inmate with the mental health issue that came out and stabbed one baby to death at 7 years old, and the other one is 6 years old and living with horror for the rest of their lives? We don't talk about those things. But these are all inmates. These are all officers that have had their chance of being assaulted. These are inmates that take razor blades and slash these other inmates. So at the end of the day, yeah, I understand. But let's get the public involved to them saying, what's the mayor going to do about the problems that Rikers has become a dumping ground? Rikers is for individuals that commit crimes.
Okay.
These mentally ill inmates did not commit a crime.
Okay, I understand that. I understand that, Mr. Seabrook. But let me ask you this question. If Mr. Lane, the man we just heard from,
right,
if he's on a gurney,
right,
and he's handcuffed, how could he be resisting?
Well, because at the end of the day, Dominic, we don't know whether or not he was handcuffed. That's what
But
he
you have
says.
several witnesses from the health clinic. Here's what they said. Here's what they said.
Sure.
The witnesses that saw this. The next morning when the day shift arrived, there was still blood splattered around examination room number 6.
Well, listen, that's what the perception is of that person.
Perception?
Now, Dominic, you know what? At the end of the day, until you've walked in the shoes of a correctional officer, you have no idea what we go through. Now, yeah, you will get those to say, well, you know, I saw this or I saw that. At the end of the day, if these things occurred that they have allegedly saw, then why wasn't action taken immediately? Which I think is total fabrication on behalf of those clinical individuals who sleep most of the time at night as opposed to doing their job. That's number one. Number two, if an inmate is handcuffed, he or she, if they're that aggressive, is handcuffed behind their back, and I will definitely agree with you that force should not be used. When I tell officers all the time, when an inmate is subdued, all force is to cease at that point. Now, let's go one step further and say that they had one of his hands. Let's say he had one of his hands, and this guy is wailing away. How do you stop him? Do you just step back, or do you try to subdue this person? And this person is fighting. Now this person has mental issues. This person can't just be simply subdued.
Right, but the person shouldn't be punched in the face repeatedly until they have broken bones in their face.
Let me ask you a very serious question. If I'm a New York City correction officer, do you think that I am Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier, and you have a referee in the ring that says, okay, no hitting below the belt, no doing this, no doing that? No. These inmates attack New York City correction officers. They attack other inmates. They attack civilians in the Department of Corrections.
So are you admitting your officers are brutal?
I'm saying to you that a correction officer must use whatever force is necessary to terminate the incident. And I am certainly not going to say to them, wait a minute. Before you decide to defend yourself and swing and punch this person, don't swing too hard, because we don't want no accidents to happen here where they get injured. No, it doesn't work like that, Dominic. You fight because your life depends on it. These are murderers, rapists, arsonists. These are individuals that take the lives of people in the public 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Gun violence is out of control. Do you think that they come there and say, let me play nice with the correction officers?